SNP to... On May the 23rd, people across this country can vote SNP to show that Scotland will not be ignored anymore. Vote SNP to stop Brexit and vote SNP to keep Scotland at the very heart of Europe.
It takes some front to build a campaign on the back of the plight of being ignored when Nicola Sturgeon has spent the best part of 3 years near enough ignoring 1 million people in Scotland that voted to leave the European Union. Never has she mentioned them. Not fucking once have I ever heard them being mentioned for any of her heartfelt pleas in her speeches. Never ever heard it coming out of the mouths of any of her feminists or her beta males that she's got in her 50-50 quota system. Not once have they been mentioned. No, it's Scotland's voice has been ignored, dragged out against our will, the usual tropes. But it's remarkable, truly remarkable. Second of all, the second thing she said there, which I found rather amusing, is that she assumes that we'd be right at the heart of Europe. What, you think that you're going to have a seat at the table alongside Macron and Merkel, and Juncker and the gang? Really? My God, wonders never cease with this BS, man.
We shouldn't forget ever that at the EU referendum in 2016, people in Scotland voted overwhelmingly to remain in the EU.
Swedish is so full of BS, man. Jesus, here we go again.
But to be clear, that situation only arises if Scotland votes remain next week. If Scotland votes to leave, then that premise for independence doesn't arise. So I'll be voting remain for a variety of very good reasons. But if you're basing your decision on what it means for independence, let me be very, very clear. The only sensible and logical vote is one for Scotland to remain in Europe. Let me be very, very clear. The only sensible and logical vote is one for Scotland to remain in Europe. If Scotland votes to leave, then our immediate future will be one inside the UK but outside the EU.
Now let's not forget here that Nicola Sturgeon is in the position she's in currently because for the last 3 elections, bar the one granted that she lost a fuck ton of seats, so the 3 elections before that one, the SNP were gaining record number seats in Parliament. Historic wins, historic victories, and that was all because of the momentum from independence that never came to be in 2014. So when she stands there and entices her diehard followers and just independent supporters in general to vote remain, because if they vote to leave, the premise for independence won't arise, you'd have a good portion of those people tactically voting, you'll have another good portion of them voting because she told them to, and then you'll have in and around them some genuine people that want to remain in the European Union. So it's not as clear cut as banging on about the heartfelt pleas of being dragged out against our will, and it's not as clear cut as proclaiming that we overwhelmingly voted to remain, and even that's questionable, but I don't want to wish to digress into that. I'm just saying the fishing terms does not make any sense to me whatsoever. Why would they all vote remain? I don't believe it. Anyway, point is, she played a major role in why Scotland supposedly voted the way we did. It was a few days before the speech from Sturgeon regarding sending a message to me. And this is regarding, again, as usual, migration powers to be devolved to Scotland, because apparently the powers that she's had up until this point have not been enough. So she needs full control, and we all know what that will lead to, especially when you combine the talk of human rights that comes up quite often in her speeches, in her articles, and from her lackeys, as well as from the UN. Funnily enough, and as well as we hear often from the EU, and somewhere else that I recall seeing human rights plastered on the front page of somewhere before. The UN Migration Compact. It's all starting to make a wee bit more sense now, I think, especially when you delve into this think tank. So migration crisis gets a mention, not too far into it for the first time. I'm sure it probably gets brought up yet again somewhere through this. It goes on to say that it's a breach of human rights, according to Human Rights Watch 2018, by proclaiming that particular criticisms have related to the EU's policy of externalisation, where third allegedly safe countries such as Turkey agree to host potential asylum seekers, even though reception conditions in the asylum system in these countries are hardly compliant with EU human rights standards. In addition, detention centres in some EU member states suffer from overcrowding and conditions that are in violation of human rights. Finally, the EU is criticised for not doing enough to prevent migrant deaths in the Mediterranean Sea. A simple solution to preventing the deaths that's said in the back, stopping them from coming over here, not encouraging them, because why it's going to keep happening until the day it stops. Because what happens if the NGOs don't happen to spot them and they continue to traverse the Mediterranean heading over here? Nobody picks them up, they get in a bit of trouble. Well, there you go, there's another death on your hands. How could that death have been prevented? By sending them back, but that's something that won't be done. Because we needed this crisis. We all know that this crisis was created deliberately in order to justify your migrant compact, but this is the BS that we all have to endure to convince us, and even if it doesn't convince us, we'll be forced into it somehow anyway. Our advisory group recommended the adoption of an act of Scottish Parliament that would restate the civil and political rights already contained in the Human Rights Act of 1998. Why do we need to restate them? Introduce key social, economic and cultural rights, the right to a healthy environment and specific rights belonging to children, women, persons with disabilities, on race and rights for older persons and for the LGBTs and the T communities into the Scots law. Every lovely little demographic there, bar one. What a shock. 4 in 10 people in Europe feel they are well informed about immigration. Indeed, clarifying the terminology used about migration is not an academic exercise, but one crucial to public understanding. Regular migration respects rules and laws. Irregular migration takes place outside regular norms of origin, transit and destination countries. Both categories can include these seeking asylum and those awarded refugee status. Irregular economic migrants can make asylum claims but will likely be rejected. They will not receive refugee status but are still counted as asylum seekers. Migrants arriving in Scotland under EU freedom of movement or with valid visas or work permits, and importantly, those entering legally and then applying for asylum, how does that become a reality? Would be considered regular migrants. Irregular migrants who enter Europe illegally may be asylum seekers who eventually attain refugee status or economic migrants who would not. In Europe, in 2016, 984,000 third world nationals were found to be illegally present in the EU, while 21 million third world country nationals were legally residing in the EU. Thus, while the vast majority of immigrants in Europe are regular, over 95% were regular rather than irregular, but public perception often thinks otherwise. Wow. Anyway, effective European and multilateral solutions to migration governance, including irregular migration, have been in short supply. In fact, the adoption in 2019 of the UN Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration actually caused the Belgian government to collapse on the back of a social media campaign against it. While 152 countries voted in favour of the Compact in the UN, several EU member states abstained, and 3 states were among the 5, along with Israel and the US, to vote against it. A demonstration of collective European solidarity. In this context, it is crucial to understand the ability of certain political parties to frame the debate about migration in overwhelmingly negative terms. What is there to be positive about letting in as many people as possible? What is it with these left-wing dickheads? Why can't they look at a situation and be honest about it instead of having to sugarcoat it with fluffy words to try and make everybody think that this is a wonderful thing because it's all about equality and inclusion and diversity? How are we expected to take anything seriously from somebody that's typed up a bunch of BS crap trying to defunk what Britishness is and talks of social justice and the need for equality for all and social justice for minorities and so on and so forth and the LGBTs and the T. People that advocate for things like that in the West and countries where these things aren't issues shouldn't really be taken seriously when they start to extend their point of view to other subjects. Anyway, political pressures in the EU for an urgent crisis response was highest in 2015, which of course 2015, the migrant crisis or the Syrian refugee crisis, that was all fabricated fake in order to exploit the chaos that came off the back of it to get that UN migration compact drawn up to begin with. It's funny how things work out. And since then, despite declining numbers of irregular migrants, the issue has not gone away because they keep being taken over here. If you'd stop taking them over here, this wouldn't be an issue. I've been saying that since I started my channel at 18 years old, and now I'm 23. That's a long time to be spouting off the same things, pointing out the common sense and the blatant holes and discrepancies in the shit that you people keep proclaiming is in fact reality. And it's not. It's far from it. Successive summits of European heads of government have continued to deal with the issue, by conjuring up their migration compact. The plans were already in place well before this ever became a thing. But of course we have to pretend otherwise, Well, let's pretend otherwise. Collective responses have been vehemently resisted by certain European Union member states, particularly those who are not first destination for irregular migration, so those particular parties and governments are openly hostile to a more welcoming migration agenda. Migration never needed to be an issue, or never really was an issue before, but, we're now being told that not only are we going to see a lot more in the coming years, it could also help to ease our supposed ageing populace problem. But of course, we're not talking about European immigration in this context, are we? Where, a couple 100,000 Polish and Romanian immigrants into Scotland would solve our ageing populace. This time round, we're talking about migration from the Islamic countries and Africa. So naturally, it wouldn't take too long before demographic change started to become a pretty obvious factor in Scotland or Europe in general. That's why a lot of people have major issues with this. But of course, you just continue to talk about welcoming migrant agenda. This is exactly why these lefty UN mouthpieces are destroying Europe from within, and they've got the gall to blame populist parties. They are the problem, not the far right, quote unquote, not people that are concerned about the future of Europe as things continue down this road, but the very people pushing for the shit that's causing the issues while pretending that the things they're pushing are in fact progressive measures and humanitarian and all about the human rights for diversity, so on and so forth. So it goes on to say, it would be difficult to make Scotland's interests and views on matters of irregular migration heard at the EU levels. It's not a sovereign state or in the Union per se. Scotland does not have a place at the table in relation to foreign development or humanitarian policy, nor can it influence justice or Home Office affairs. Furthermore, the separate political positions of the governments, meaning the UK and the Scottish, are not currently aligned when it comes to migration. This could change, however, if the change of UK government or if Scottish political parties hold more influences and or a direct line to ministers in any future UK government. Smaller EU member countries such as Sweden, Ireland and Luxembourg with a more progressive outlook on migration, and look how wonderful Sweden is turning out, and Ireland is heading that way too, but it's okay because it's progression. How fucking warped. If Scotland did become independent, and if its government then continued to hold its current views on migration, it could ally with these states. Another route for Scottish engagement on migration is the Parliament. While the UK remains an EU member, Scotland will continue to send MEPs to serve in the Parliament. Some contend that the next Parliament will move to the right and take a much harder line on migration and asylum seekers, which, if true, puts a bit of a dent in the agenda that you are actively advocating for currently. This shift would undoubtedly have an impact on the Parliament's position on issues associated with irregular migration, which shouldn't be issues at all for any of us to adhere to. Why is this a thing? Oh, that's right, because communists and socialists and so-called progressives seem to have it in their thick fucking heads that this is what we need. This is what needs to happen in our society in order for us to move forward, because for some strange reason, this is the status quo now. It's unreal.
And of course, being in the European Union also safeguards freedom of movement. The freedom of movement that has benefited not just us, but our economy and our public services.
To the scenario where Sturgeon's using free movement of people within the European Union context to actually get what she truly wants, and that is immigration for wherever the hell she pleases. You know what I mean? And let's not beat around the bush here.
It has boosted staff in our National Health Service and social care sector, and it has helped to reverse population decline in Scotland. So on May the 23rd, let's not demonise the contribution that our fellow EU citizens have made to...
Who has done that? The only person I've heard from the get-go banging on about possible problems for EU citizens living in the United Kingdom currently after Brexit is her.
And it has helped to reverse population decline in...
That you've been too lazy to try and rectify. You know what I mean? What is it with these politicians? Are they all coming from the same tribe? And no, I don't mean the tribe in question. I mean, are they all UN mouthpieces? Is this what's going on here? Has every single country got their own version of Sturgeon? Because this seems to be a common theme. They are so obsessed with the prospect of borders being wide open to all that wish to come here. They then start proclaiming that diversity is a wonderful thing, and then they really start to up the ante slightly and say that we need these people over here because apparently our populaces are